again, everybody. This is Vicki Brown, and welcome to our next installment of Management Matters. Today, I have with me employment attorney Zaylore Stout, and we're going to talk about some of the things that new managers may not have thought of, but have to think about once they get that promotion. Zaylore, welcome to the show this month.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
So Zaylor and I have known each other for quite some time now, and I thought he'd be a perfect guest to help us out with this. So I want to start with a concept that I learned a long time ago called owning the whole. And to me, this has taken a deep meaning as something as a manager I've always encompassed. And it means that when I moved from being an individual contributor to a manager, I became the face of the business, regardless of where I was, what I was doing. I needed to own the whole. I needed to be responsible for the reputation of the company. I needed to be responsible for how I how I how others saw us. And so if you can talk a little bit about what that means to the new manager making that transition from individual contributor to manager.
I actually really love that concept, owning the whole, because it is a big and distinct difference between when you are just an employee and an individual contributor. Your responsibility is to bring in sales or provide customer service, right? You have one specific task to do there. But then as a manager, you have all of a sudden two sets of audiences that you have to make sure that you satisfy your upper management within the organization. And they're really a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times focused on numbers and things of that nature, and your
Mm-hmm.
employees want to make sure that they feel as though that they're valued and things of, and all of that. And so owning the whole really deals with, it's not passing the buck in regards to, let's say, edicts and policies that come down from upper management. Historically, a lot of times folks will say, well, I wasn't involved in the decision making, or this is what it
Yes.
is, or, but you are responsible for making sure that your team has bought into that new policy as well. And so it's important for you then, as a member of the management team, to seek the information and knowledge and facts and arguments and perspectives, so that you can actually individually be bought in, so that you can ensure that the rest are bought in regards to it. So you're a team player then, like as you indicated, you are part of management, you're part of the ownership of the organization.
Yeah.
It's your responsibility to make sure that that not only on your team and your staff are doing things that cast the organization in a favorable light, but I mean, you are part of that team. When people think about organization XYZ, you can't point to the corner and say that's company XYZ. Company XYZ are
Yeah.
people that are involved in representing those organizations, and so owning the whole is really all about that. And it's owning those that are high performers on your team and those that are low performers on your team, right? And so it's really focusing on in regards to the entirety of it, and not just focused on your individual contribution to the organization, but how you can contribute to the
Yeah.
whole organization via your team
Yeah.
or your department.
Yeah. And for me, sometimes it was even little things like walking into the building and picking up a piece of trash
Hmm.
that's on the ground. It's important. You want to make sure that the organization is always represented in a good light. And that becomes the untold part, if you will, of your job description, I believe.
Yeah.
So, so what are some of the pitfalls as we move from, I always use the accountant as the example. You know, you're the best accountant in the company, so we're going to promote you and now put you in charge of a team. What do I do? What are some of the things that are going to keep me out of trouble and going to keep the company out of trouble?
Well, there are several pitfalls, I'd say, especially coming from an HR background prior to becoming an attorney and now working in the
Oh,
employment law space. So 24 years now in this arena. I'd say some of the major pitfalls, especially when folks are promoted from within, so now they're
Hmm.
managing people that they were coworkers with, is managing friendships. And
Yes.
that's one of the hardest things is being, when I do, manager and supervisor training for organizations, it's really part of the establishing your authority kind of a situation. It sounds like it's really this big thing and it sounds ominous, but it's really not that. It's understanding and separating out the fact that you shouldn't be going out and drinking with your friends with your coworkers anymore. That you have a different expectation and responsibility to the organization because if something happens, even off site, that could rise to the level of discrimination or rise to the level of sexual harassment, even if it's not a company sponsored or sanctioned event. If you, as a member of the management team, are aware of it, and employees come back into work, and you have to do something about it, right? You have to address it. And so it's really those different types of things, as well as the issue of making sure that you're treating everybody equally and fairly. It's easy to treat people differently when you're an employee and you're a coworker. You're friends with certain people, you're not friends with other people. But when you are a member of management, your responsibility and obligation is to make sure you're enforcing the organization's policies and procedures evenly. So if somebody comes into work late, if an employee comes into work late 3 times and the organization's policy is that they receive a written warning or a verbal warning, you need to do that with folks that are your friends and folks that aren't your friends. Because if you treat folks differently from that perspective, you're not only opening up the organization to potential
Hmm.
liability as it relates to discrimination and harassment, but also yourself, because many states include the ability to add individual managers' names on to these lawsuits for this type of inconsistent conduct. So
Yeah.
those are really, really big and important factors, I think, can result in some pitfalls. But I'm sure we'll end up spending some time probably referencing some other ones, especially ones that you have come across in your experience too.
I think that it is important that if you are promoted to a situation where you are managing your friends,
Hmm.
you find a way to transfer them out of your direct control for a couple of reasons. Not only is it important to the organization, but you don't want to give up your friendship. And so why put yourself in that position where you're routinely, Fred was over at your house for a barbecue on
Hmm.
Saturday and you got
Yeah.
promoted on Monday, and now you have to tell Fred he can't come to the barbecues anymore. Um, find a way to talk with your direct manager about how this may affect your team. Divulge those relationships if they don't already know, and find some workaround. It will make your life and Fred's life and your manager's life a lot easier. Some of the other things that I think with in not only in managing um, friendships, but in not knowing the liabilities
Hmm.
that the company may face. I had a situation once where my boss allowed a colleague to work whenever he wanted, but he was an
Hmm.
hourly employee. And
Yeah.
I had to explain that by allowing him to do that, she was putting the company at risk for thousands upon thousands of dollars of fines. And all it would take was for him to get upset with her once and say,
Yeah.
well, I've been allowed to do this. Can you talk about that a little bit about some of the legal ramifications?
Absolutely. And I was actually really close to referencing that one. It deals with the wage and
Yeah.
hour matters because that there's EPLI, Employment Practices Liability Insurance, is an insurance that a lot of businesses have, small and medium-sized businesses. So this is a cool
Hmm.
tip for those business owners. If you don't have that insurance, talk to your insurance broker. It's not something that comes with your basic business insurance. It's a rider that you have to pay extra for. It's
Okay.
normally not a lot of money, but
I
it would
will
cover
check
you.
that.
Yeah, EPLI, Employment Practices Liability Insurance. So it normally covers matters of discrimination, harassment, wrongful termination. What it does not cover are wage and hour matters. So this is things in regards to whether employees are properly classified as as independent contractors versus employees. It covers whether
Mm,
employees are properly classified as exempt versus non-exempt, meaning are they entitled to overtime compensation or not. Each state has different laws as it relates to
okay.
when employees are entitled to breaks and meal periods. States like
Mm-hmm.
California are very strict and very clear cut in regards to
Yes.
what those expectations and requirements are. And if you are unable to provide folks with the appropriate breaks or meals, you can prepay penalties as it relates to that and have those types of things be on their paychecks. Whereas states like Minnesota are a lot more Minnesota nice in regard to how they describe it. So they'll say, you have a reasonable amount of time for lunch. Well, what is a reasonable amount of time? So it leaves some of that subjectiveness as it relates to it, which can create a lot of problems, right?
Yeah.
And so, all of these wage and hour issues can really be expensive and costly, as you've indicated. And all you need is somebody to get mad at somebody once. And if they have not been clocking in and out, because that's not what you're required for them to do, then the presumption is that they'll just go off of what the person says. And if they said they work 60 hours a week and you don't have anything to combat that in writing to be able to show that that was not at the hours that they worked, then you're between a rock and a hard place. So really monitoring those wage and hour issues is extremely significant and can be extremely costly, especially when you end up, let's say, working for a larger organization
Yeah.
where, the people's claims can be cobbled together in regards to potential class action lawsuits. You see that even with some of these larger companies where you'll find that somebody that's a member of the management team is spending less than half of their time engaging in managerial duties. I remember back in the day when I worked for Taco Bell, and there was a class action lawsuit against the organization because when drive-through cashier called in sick, guess who was working in the drive-through cashier? When the taco maker called in
Yeah.
sick, guess who was making tacos? And so what they found was that on average, the managers weren't spending the bulk of their time managing. They were spending most of their time filling in for the work of employees as hourly employees. And that means they were misclassified and should have been receiving overtime compensation based on all the time that they worked. So there's all these rubrics in regards to these things, and it gets really detailed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you need to make sure that you have HR folks that you're working with, that the HR folks have connections with employment lawyers that can provide advice and guidance in regard to these areas. But
Yeah.
these are spots where managers who are on the ground, who are working with their staff on a day-to-day basis, can really get tripped up
Mm-hmm.
because they're trying to help out, right? They're like, oh,
Yeah.
if you take this day off, then, just take an extra day off next week. But, or just work an extra day next week. Well, that could mean that they're
Right.
working overtime. And
Right.
you may have this gentleman's agreement with this individual that that's what's going to happen, and you're not going to then they're going to forego overtime pay, but that may not necessarily be something that they can waive away.
Yeah. I think one of the pitfalls that I see new supervisors and new managers fall into is that they don't know the law. And so they go in, you may go in going, all right, I'm the boss and Fred's my friend, or I want to be great with everybody. And so I'm going to do this way without understanding beyond company policy.
Yeah.
You have to realize that there are municipal, state, and federal laws that you are now subject to following
Yeah.
because, again, your job is to own the whole. You are now the face of the I almost said the university. You are the face of the company, whether it's a small company or whether it's a multi-million-dollar corporation. Just because you're on that first rung doesn't mean you're any less responsible. So before you take that promotion, think about everything that it entails. And that's what we're trying to help you
Mhm.
understand and realize. Promotions are great, right? You know what the company's going to do for you. They're going to give you a bump in pay, maybe some
Mhm.
perks, a chance to grow, but you also have an obligation to them that's different than you did when you were crunching numbers. So, and that kind of brings me to what might be my last question, because this is a great conversation. How does that new person, that 20 something, that 30-something that's never been a manager before, how do they approach changing their mindset before they're promoted? Because they know they want to be promoted. How do they start changing their mindset to get ready for that? Or maybe should they start changing their mindset? I think yes, but
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I'd say that there should definitely be a change of mindset because really a lot of times there are individuals within an organization that you can see get fast tracked into management, right?
okay.
And sometimes it's because you can see that they already have that management mindset. They're already, objective in the regards of the way that they interact with folks. They're already, aware of what the organization's policies and procedures are and ensuring that they're following those organization's policies and procedures, that they're providing adequate feedback and insight in regards to increasing and improving the organization's productivity and things of that nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then also able to show, because really the huge difference between somebody that's in management and somebody that is not, it's the person that and people that have the interpersonal skills to be able to manage
Yes.
people, right?
Yes.
Because
It's a
there are
people
folks that are
job. Yeah.
it's a people job, absolutely. And like you
Yeah.
said, with the accountants, it's perfect, right? Because you can just deal with the numbers and, the numbers won't talk back. But, when you're dealing with,
Yeah.
you have an employee that's worked for you forever and now they're starting to come into work late, or you notice that they're distracted in regard to their work. How do you know what to do? Right? How do you know
Right.
that you should be calling them into the office and know and having that conversation with them in regards to, hey, I've noticed that there's something different. What's going on? How is it that I can help and support you? As opposed to somebody that's new in the management position will be like, well, you're not performing the standard and you need to perform the standard. And they come right back with this
Yes.
dictatorial kind of
Yes.
adversarial approach. And that's not the best way to go about it. And
No.
sometimes this is information and tactics that come with time and experience working in this space.
Mm-hmm.
You can always read up in regards to these different types of things, but
I'm
I'd say
writing a book on just that. So I'll let you know when
perfect.
it's published.
Everybody should run and buy it. But I mean, but those that's really one of the huge differences that you're managing people and people are different and malleable. And
Yes.
there's a whole session I do in regards to motivation, and it's you can't motivate people. You can place people in a position where they can be self-motivated. And so what do you do as it relates to that? There's just a lot of there's a lot of interpersonal skills that are
Mm-hmm.
really required in regard to folks in management. And sometimes that's what makes the difference between individuals that are promoted and peace individuals that aren't. As
Yeah.
some ideally you would hope that the organization either sees that that person has those skills already, or that they can be trained to also have those skills. So the other thing that I'd recommend for
Mm-hmm.
folks that are potentially moving into or see themselves ideally moving into a managerial or supervisory position is also asking, what support will they be provided by what kind of support will HR be able to provide to them? What type of training will be available? And if you can get that in writing where there's some type of concrete stuff where either the organization does the training and has training, or they can send you
Mm-hmm.
out for training or sign you up for some training so that you can get a full grasp in regards to what it is, how do you become a leader? Right?
Yeah.
How are you
Yeah.
able to, garner followers for folks to be able to, trust in your vision for your department or your vision for the organization and know that that's the right path to go. And so there's just a lot of things as it relates to, becoming a manager and becoming a leader within the organization that will require work. Because just because you get the promotion
Yeah.
overnight doesn't mean you're going to be suited up for success there, that there's
Not at
still a lot of work
all.
involved in it.
Not at all. And that brings me to another question. I'm going to flip the script a little bit because one of the things that I talk about is when you are promoted, the company's focus is on the company. And so a lot of their quote unquote manager training will be, these are our policies, these are our procedures, this is our vision, our mission, but not on developing you
Mhm.
as a manager. And I think we both can speak to that. That's why we do the workshops and the
That's
consulting
exactly it.
that we do, because corporations or even small businesses are concentrating on the bottom line. So
Mhm.
what can businesses do and business owners do to make sure that their management academies are going beyond this is our mission, this is our policies, and help develop that individual? Because like you said, the people on your team, the Fred that came into work yesterday may not be the Fred that's going to come to work tomorrow because they're stuck in traffic for 2 hours. They're going to be a
Mhm.
completely different person. What can businesses do to help managers understand that and prepare for that?
Well, given my 24 years in this work, I can say that a lot of times, unfortunately, especially with small and medium-sized businesses, the folks that end up in HR positions were the payroll person that end up become the payroll manager, which end up becoming
Yes.
the HR manager and director, even though they may not necessarily have the educational background in regard to HR. It's not a good, I'm not saying that it's that they shouldn't be in those roles in those positions, just saying that they don't have the HR background that may be necessary to be able to support those managers. And that just
Okay.
is what it is, because as organizations grow, they don't necessarily have, it takes time for them to get to a point where they can spend the 70, 80, $90,000 it may cost to have an HR manager full time within the organization.
And if
So
I
what I,
could point out, if I
yes,
could point
absolutely.
out that HR isn't HR isn't HR. There are transactional parts to HR which are totally different from
Mhm.
strategic parts. They're not
Yep.
all the same. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to add was, organizations can always pair up with, an outsourced HR consultant that can supplement the work that needs to happen in these spaces. And they can supplement and provide that additional training that your HR manager on site may not necessarily have the skill set to do,
Hmm.
right? So it's just understanding the skill set of those within your organization
Right.
and understanding when you need to tap somebody from the outside to come and supplement some of that work, at least until your organization gets to a point, let's say, where you actually need to go out and hire somebody that has that HR experience that your organization may need. But I know that a lot of these small and medium-sized businesses are doing their best with what they have, right? And they don't necessarily
Yeah.
know what they don't know what they don't know. And it's critical and crucial that managers and supervisors get the training that they need, because they're the ones that can end up costing you a whole lot of money by
Yeah.
just not knowing, that what they did was wrong, or that starting to write up somebody that told them last week that they were pregnant, even though they've always been a crappy employee, right? It's just these things, like I can rattle off 10, 15 different scenarios that happen every single year with clients that have
Yeah.
always happened every single year. But the businesses they just don't know any better, and so it's really partnering up and having somebody in your corner that's
Hmm.
really there to provide that feedback and that backup that you need, and to get you to the point where you're able to be as successful as possible and minimizing your risks.
I think that is an absolutely great way to end a fabulous discussion. I think there are more discussions in our future. Um,
Absolutely.
I want to thank you so much for what you've contributed. People can contact me or you and learn more about what, quite frankly, we do and how we can
Mhm.
help, but also reach out to your managers, reach out to find out what your state laws are and your municipal laws, and
Mhm.
make sure that you understand that your job as a manager, even as a supervisor or a
Mhm.
lead, is growing. And like I always like to say, remember, management matters. So,
It sure
Zaylor,
does.
thank you again so much, and we will be in contact.
Thanks so much.